What's up YouTube, this is Dennis Panuta for tutorials.eu. In this video you are going to learn how to use Retrofit in Android in order to get data from an API, so load data from the Rick and Morty API in this particular case, and then display it in a recycler view. And we're going to build it up step by step. And then in the next video, which will come next week, we are going to look at MVVM, so model view model. And then in the third video, we're going to look at coroutines. Okay, so we're going to use that particular example and we're going to build up on it. So first we're going to build it in a simple and dirty fashion, but using Retrofit in order to load the data. In the second video, we're going to clean it up using MVVM so that we are using this pattern and have a proper architecture. And then in the third video, we're going to look at coroutines in order to optimize our code even further. And well, you are going to require coroutines in the future whenever you want to do stuff in the background, which means run something that is not going to run on the main thread if it's not required. So let's start with this particular example, looking at Retrofit and building this little application. And if you think that this is a great idea and you are excited about this video, then hit that like button. It really helps us out. And also hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. And now let's get started. All right, so before we build the application, let's look at the Android networking with Retrofit overview, where you will get an idea of how networking, so basically connecting to an API with Retrofit works. So there are two different parts to consider when making a request: the client and the server. So a client can be any of your devices, the phone, the tablet, the laptop, or even a browser, while the server can be any central computer or program that controls or provides the information that you need. So you're sending the request to the server and the server gives you a response, which then can be used on the client side in order to display something. So to display the data. So it's our task as developers to then use this data and present it in a nice format. So the client and server uses the HTTP method to communicate with each other. That is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So if you were wondering what HTTP stands for. And there are specific methods created to enable them understand each other, which include the add-get, and that's the get method that tells the server that you need to read data from it. Then add-post, which is the post method that tells the server that you need to create or add data to it. Then you have the put method, which tells the server that you need to update an already existing piece of data. And then you have the delete method that tells the server that you need to delete specific data from it. So it's actually a create, read, update, and delete process. So in our case, we're going to send a request to a page and then it will load all of the data and it will give us back the data in a certain format in form of a response. And we are going to try then to build the application that you can see on the left hand side so that the client, meaning our phone, will display this. So there are 5 different ranges when it comes to the response status code. You have the 100 to 199, which is information. Then you have the 200 range, which is success. You have the 300 range, which is redirection. 400, which means that there is an error on the client side, and 500, which means there is an error on the server side. So the 500 range, so to speak. But the most frequently encountered ones are 200, which means that your request was successful. 404, which most people might have experienced, which means the information you requested was not found. So the client might have to send a request that does not exist or is an incorrect one. And then the 500, which is an internal server error, or 503, which means service is unavailable. So here's the API that we are going to work with. So rickandmortyapi.com/API/character/ and then the request that we do, we want to display page 1. Okay, let's look at the sample JSON response. So here you see, if you enter this link and you look at the raw data that you get, this is what you're gonna get. So there are results, which is going to be an array, and this array consists of, for example, the ID 1, which contains Rick Sanchez as the details, and that's the one that we are interested in. So we're not going to care about the ID, the status, the species, the type, and so forth. We are only going to take the name as well as the image that you can see highlighted here. And the image is basically just an URL that you can then use in order to then display it on your phone and in your application. All right, so here would be a shorter version of the data that we are going to need. So we will create a character response class to represent the first curly brace with a list of results. The square bracket represents an array or a list, and then we're going to create a character class to represent the curly bracket inside of the array, which means in this case it's the name with Rick Sanchez and then the image with the, well, URL to the image of Rick Sanchez. All right, so let's go over to Android Studio and actually build the application. So you're learning something about Android app development in this video, and maybe you want to learn a lot more about it. Then you can check out one of my 2 courses. So if you are a beginner Android developer, then I would highly recommend to check out my Android Masterclass course. There you will learn to build Android apps from scratch and you become a real Android developer. Or maybe you want to become a better Android developer because you are one already and you want to become a real pro. Then I would recommend to check out the Jetpack Masterclass, because there you will learn how to use Jetpack, which is a suite of frameworks that will make sure that you are a senior app developer. All right, so I would really recommend to check out those courses if you want to step up your app development skills very quickly. You can find a link in the description below, which will send you to the course with a huge discount. All right, so thanks a lot for checking out those courses. This really helps us out and this enables us to create these videos. Either way, I wish you a nice journey to becoming a great app developer. And now let's get back to the video. All right, so now in Android Studio, let's go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to select the empty activity here. I'm going to call this application Retrofit example, and the package name is going to be, in my case, eu.tutorials.retrofit example. Then as the minimum SDK, I'm going to use Android Lollipop, so API 21, which runs on pretty much all devices, and that's going to be fine. So let's click finish and create this project. Okay, once this project is created, let's go over to our build.grail retrofit example app file. And here we are going to need a couple of things. So the first thing that I want to make sure that I have is going to be that the view binding is enabled. So here inside of Android, at the very bottom, I'm going to add the lines, build features, and view binding set to true. So this will now allow me to enable view binding and use it in my application. And now down in dependencies, where there are already a bunch of dependencies, for example, the app compat, the Kotlin extensions, the materials, and so forth, that's where I'm going to add my own dependencies that I want to use, which will be Retrofit and Moshi. So first of all, let's add the versions, and I'm going to use the Moshi version of 1.9.3 and the Retrofit version of 2.9.0. Okay, and then in order to use Retrofit, I'm just going to add this implementation here saying com.square up retrofit2 : retrofit : and then the retrofit version that we had here with a $sign. So here you have to be super precise, otherwise this won't work. And Retrofit is going to take care of the networking side. So it will allow us to download data using a GET request, for example. And then we're going to use Moshi. Moshi will help us to convert a JSON file into something easily readable, which will be Kotlin objects. It will basically convert JSON data into Kotlin objects that we can then very easily use. And then I'm going to use the Retrofit with Moshi implementation, which will allow me to convert Retrofit into Moshi, which will then do the trick to convert it into our required Kotlin objects. And then I will use coil. So here, this will allow me to load the URL and then directly use the image inside of my application. So in the image views, this will allow me to be a lot faster with it, a lot less code instead of doing it the old-fashioned way. So now let's sync it and let's wait for the syncing to be done. And now that it's done, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have internet permission in my Android manifest, because that's something that you might forget, and it's really important to make sure that you have it, because otherwise, well, this whole thing won't work. So you need to ask for the permission to have access to the internet inside of the Android manifest with this line here. Otherwise, you won't get internet permission. All right, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and inside of our tutorials EU retrofit example, let's create a new folder. So I'm going to create a new package here, and I'm going to call this one network. And inside of network, that's where I'm going to put my networking information. So first of all, let's go ahead and create a new Kotlin class that will be my character. Okay, so I will have my character, which will be a Kotlin class like so. So this will be my data class that I want to create. All right, and this data class will take care of the model. So this will basically be my model class. All right, so let's add the data keyword in front of it. And then also let's make sure that we're not using the curly brackets, but we're using rounded brackets like so. So the data that I want to have here will also use JSON. So basically we want to use the JSON details, which means the name, for example, which will be Crazy Rick, which we, for example, get from here. Okay, this is insanely unreadable. So there is this JSON formatter. You can use any JSON formatter, which will help you. So I'm going to use this JSON name property, and I want it to be the property in my data class. So it will be Rick Sanchez. And then I want to use the image in order to, well, get this URL and then display it. Okay, so this is just a formatted version, which is a little more readable, and now you could read a lot more information from it, as I said earlier, and you could use it. So you could even display whether the character displayed is human, male, and so forth. Okay, so now this data class should use all of that. How can we make sure of that? Well, we can go ahead and just use the, first of all, JSON. So import com.squareup.moshi.json, like so. All right, so this of course will only work if you made sure to add Moshi here, otherwise it wouldn't work. So now what is our character going to consist of? Well, first of all, he will have a name, which will be of type string, and then he will have an image, which will be of type string as well, because we just get the URL, right? So this by itself would work fine, but I want to specifically say that this will be the JSON object that has the name of name. Okay, and then the same goes for this image. I will specifically state that this will have the name of image. Okay, so this is not really necessary in this case because we are using the exact names already, but this is just good practice if you want to make sure that this is actually going to work perfectly. So add this, and then what it will do is it will basically link this property, this name property, to the data that we get from here, which will be linked to this name property of JSON. Okay, so the same goes of course for the image as well. So here, this image here. All right, so that's what this data class is going to do. And in here, I'm also going to directly create another data class, which will be the character response. So this will give us the name results, so the JSON results. And I'm going to make sure to have a result here, which will be a list of my character, like so. And this needs to be close to this opening bracket. So here we're just saying, okay, we want to get the result, which will basically be a list of the character data objects that we had up here. So if you look at the result, you see here that there are results, okay? So we get multiple results, and each of them is going to be a character. So the first one is Rick Sanchez, the second one is Morty Smith, then Summer Smith, Beth Smith, and so forth. So this is a list of characters that we get. And the results, so the result that we are interested in, is going to have this information for us. So that's basically what we're saying. Give us the results and make a list out of it. And what kind of list? Well, a character list. All right, and next, inside of my network, I'm going to create a new interface. So inside of the network folder, let's create an object class. So here, Kotlin class file, select object down here and call it API client. So this will be our API client using the object keyword, so we can call the API service directly without needing to initialize the class. So we don't need to create an object of this class in order to use it. So what is it that we want to do here? Well, first of all, we need to get the URL, the base URL that we want to modify. Okay, so let's create a variable that will be this base URL. So private value base URL, which will be this string of https://rickandmortyapi.com/API/, and then whatever comes after is modifiable. Because if you go to the API of Rick and Morty, you can select multiple different API calls. So here you can get the characters, so go over to docs. You can get the characters, you can get the locations, the episodes, and so forth, right? And we're interested in the characters. So here, get all characters, get a single character, get multiple characters. There are different kind of options here. So we're going to get the characters, which means we will need to use character as the next part, and then another slash, and then comes the page at which the character will be. Okay, so this will be the base URL that we're using. And next we need to create a variable for the Moshi builder. Okay, so we're going to use that in order to convert the URL into something that is usable. So here, let's use Moshi. And in order to use Moshi, we need to make sure that we have the imports. Okay, so first of all, let's add the Kotlin JSON adapter factory and then also the Moshi namespace. So here you see the two imports are added, the Kotlin JSON adapter factory as well as Moshi. And now let's use Retrofit. So we create an instance of Retrofit using the by lazy keywords here. This will allow us to initialize only when it's needed and pass the base URL and the Moshi variables created above. So for this to work, of course, we need to make sure to import Retrofit. So let's import that. And the Moshi converter with Alt Enter. Okay, so what we're saying here is build something with Retrofit, use the base URL, then add the converter factory using our Moshi converter factory, which creates using our Moshi. And then we build it. So basically this will create the URL, which will then be used in order to get the data from the API. So now below this object class, let's go ahead and create an interface, and it will be the API service interface. So what this will do is, let me first of all make sure that I get the imports right here. So import the get keyword, the query, as well as Retrofit call. And here we're going to use the Retrofit2 call. Okay, so let's look at the imports. You see we imported a bunch of Retrofit libraries. So here the call, the Retrofit, the Moshi converter factory, HTTP, get, as well as query. So what's up here? So we create this get, which will get us the character. And we're going to have a function here, which will fetch the characters with an query, so a search, so to speak, where we are querying the page. And we call to get the character response. And what we want to get are the characters. All right, now that we have the API service ready, let's go ahead and create an instance of the API service inside of our object API client here. Okay, so I'm going to create that at the very bottom, where I'm going to basically say API service is going to be loaded lazily, and we're going to use this retrofit that we just created in order to create an API service. So what this will just allow us to do is to actually use this API service to then get the characters. So now in our main activity, that's where we can go ahead and actually use it. So let's first of all create a variable and call the fetch characters method. So here we create a new client where we use our API client dot API service. So this is this API service that we just created, this instance of our API service, so that we can now use it, and we call the fetch characters method from page 1. Okay, so that's what's going to happen here, because we're saying basically add to the URL the page and then use page 1. So that's what's happening here. And then let's call the enqueue method and pass the callback interface and then override the onResponse and failure. So now let's call the enqueue method and pass the callback interface and then override the onResponse and onFailure. So what that means is we're going to use this client here to then enqueue our callback. So here we're creating our callback with our character response. Okay, and then we have to add the different statements in here. So now this callback will require you to add the onResponse. All right, so here, when we get the response, what is it that we want to do? Well, we want to, first of all, check if the response is positive. So here we say response is successful. So if the response is successful, then let's execute some code here. Okay, what is it that we want to execute? Well, for now, let's just display the response body. Okay, so let's get the entire response body onto our console. And then we also need to check what should happen if this was not successful. So here let's add the onFailure as well. So on failure, we are going to get the failed message. And in case it is complaining here for you, what you can add is retrofit2.callback. So we are using the retrofit2.callback. Maybe I had the wrong import here, as it seems it used this Java X security auth callback. So if that happens, just make sure that you are using the retrofit2 callback. Okay, so this will just be a callback that will basically run this API service. It will fetch the page, and then if it was successful, it will give us the page as the response, that body. So we're reading the entire page, so to speak, and on failure, we're just going to log the error. So now if you run the application, you will see that it just says hello world. And if you look at the logcat and search for character here, you will find characters. So it's this statement here with the character response, and the character response says the first character is Rick Sanchez with this image. Then the next character is Morty Smith with this image URL, and so forth. So we now have all of these beautiful people from Rick and Morty, from this TV show, and we can directly use those. Okay, so now we just need to bring them into a format that is a little nicer. Therefore, I'm just going to create an adapter and a recycler view here that will help me with that. So what I'm going to use is my recycler view for that. So if you don't know how recycler views work, I would recommend you check out my video on recycler views. So here in layouts, we will need to create a new resource layout file. I'm going to call this one RV item, and this will be not a constraint layout, but it will be a card view. Okay, so I'm going to use the card view root element, and that will be my file. So at this point, it's not very happy, so I'm just going to paste in my code and quickly go over it. So basically we have a card view inside of which we have a constraint layout, and that's it. So inside of this constraint layout, which wraps the content, is gravitated towards the center and matches the parent, we have an image view, which has a scale type of center crop. We need to have an ID for it so that we can access it. As a source, I'm using the default IC image launcher. It's to the top of the parent as well to the start of the parent, and it wraps its content. And then we have a text view, which is going to have a text size of 14. It's going to be black. It's going to be at the bottom of the ID of the image, which means of the bottom of this image view. And basically the start off will be the image, and the end off will be the image. So let's look at the design. We can see that this will basically be the design where you have the image view and the title underneath. So image and name. So now that will be the individual item, the recycler view item. Okay. And now let's use this recycler view item in our recycler view, which means we will need to have an adapter. So let's go ahead and create a new adapter. So here, let's go ahead and create a new Kotlin class. I'm going to call this one main adapter. So you're learning something about Android app development in this video, and maybe you want to learn a lot more about it. Then you can check out one of my 2 courses. So if you are a beginner Android developer, then I would highly recommend to check out my Android Masterclass course. There you will learn to build Android apps from scratch and you become a real Android developer. Or maybe you want to become a better Android developer because you are one already and you want to become a real pro. Then I would recommend to check out the Jetpack Masterclass, because there you will learn how to use Jetpack, which is a suite of frameworks that will make sure that you are a senior app developer. All right, so I would really recommend to check out those courses if you want to step up your app development skills very quickly. You can find a link in the description below, which will send you to the course with a huge discount. All right, so thanks a lot for checking out those courses. This really helps us out and this enables us to create these videos. Either way, I wish you a nice journey to becoming a great app developer. And now let's get back to the video. Now, in order to use this main adapter, I need to make sure that my activity main is going to be ready to display a recycler view. So here I'm just going to use a default recycler view, which will take the entire available space. Okay, so I'm going to call this recycler view characters recycler view, or characters RV. It's going to match the parent in width and height, and it's going to be to the, well, the bottom is going to be to the bottom of the parent and the top is going to be to the top of the parent, which basically means it will take the entire available space as you see here. And it's going to display one item after the other. All right, now let's go over to our main adapter, because this is where a lot of things happen. But as I said, I would recommend that you check out my video on recycler views. So this main adapter is going to use the characters list, which will be a list of our character class, which we created earlier. So it's this one here, the character class. So it should display those. And I'm just going to say that it's going to use the recycler view dot adapter class. So it's going to inherit from it. Okay. And here we're going to use the main adapter dot main view holder, which we of course also have to set up for this to work properly. Okay, so let me get rid of this as well. So it says I'm not happy, I need to have a main view holder. Okay, so let's create an inner class in here, which will be the main view holder. And I'm going to just create it like so. So this is generally how a main view holder is going to look like. So you need to pass in an item view, and then you need to bind the data. Okay, so here I'm going to create a function which will bind the data, where I'm going to bind the character, well, pass the character, and then inside of it, I need to assign the name, which will take the item view that is passed to me, find its ID and use its name, which basically means it's going to use this recycler view item name here. So the ID name, this one. And then we're assigning the image as well. So let's do the same thing with the image view. So here I'm going to find the view by ID using the image view. Then let me say that the name.text property will actually be the character name. So the character that we're loading via retrofit is going to be now used in order to display it in our recycler view right here for every single item that we're looking at. That's what this adapter is for, right? It's going to fill every single item for us. Now with the image, it's a little more complicated because we're going to load it and we're going to load the character image and we're going to do it using coil. So we added this dependency in the Gradle. You might recall that quite early in the video. We added this dependency and now let's go ahead and use it. So let's load the image. Therefore, let's make sure we import coil. You see coil.load is imported. And now we just need to make sure how we want the image to look like. So I'm going to say, I want it to be in a circle format. So circle crop transformation is what I'm going to add here. So now this is of course not everything that the main adapter needs. So you can hover over it and implement the members that it requires. I'm just going to implement all of them. So let's do that. We have the onCreate view holder, onBind view holder, and get item count. Now let's take care of those. So the item count is going to be the easiest one. Let's start with that one. So we're going to just return the characters list size. And what is the characters list? Well, it's this one here that we get when we create the main adapter. All right. And then in the onView holder, onBind view holder, here we're just going to say the holder should bind the data based on the characters list at the position that it currently is looking at. So here the onBind view holder is going to give us the position inside of the list that we're currently looking at, and we're just going to say, okay, get the characters list at that position and bind the data to the holder. So basically to that particular item that we're looking at. And onCreate view holder, well, here we're just going to return the main view holder with the layout inflator using the parent context. And we're going to inflate it with our layout that we prepared. So r.layout or rv_item. So this recycler view item thingy. So we're basically saying every single item should look like this. Okay, so that's what this inflate will do for us. And as the attached root, I'm going to say it's false. And then I forgot to also add the parent here, like so. So this should now inflate the RV item for every single one of the items. Okay, so now let's just use this main adapter that we created because we're never using it. And where do we want to use it? Well, if the response was successful. Okay, so in here, instead of just using the character response inside of our logcat, let's actually use it and inflate our or fill up our recycler view with it. So here, let's get the result. So val result, which will be based on the response body. And I'm going to get the result from the body. Okay, so the response body, this one that we used here, we're going to get its result. And now we can use that result. So if it exists, then let's do something with it. So if it's not empty, we're saying do something. And here, first of all, we need to create an adapter object, which will be our main adapter to which we pass the result. So here, as you might recall, the main adapter needs to have a characters list, and the result that we have gotten, if you recall that in the log, was in fact a characters list. So here characters with the characters response. So here it was a result with, you see the square bracket, that's indicating that this is a list. So we're getting character 1, then character 2, and so forth. So that's exactly the format that we wanted, right? So we're passing this to the adapter, and now we just need to make sure that we also use our recycler view and we're going to find it by using the ID. Well, it will be of type recycler view r.id.characters rv, which means we're going to use this in our activity main, this recycler view, and we're saying, okay, use this recycler view now, please. And now we just need to link them together. So let's use our recycler view, which can be null, and use the layout manager, which I'm going to use a staggered grid layout manager so that the images can be next to each other, right? So here I'm just going to say to with the staggered grid layout manager being vertically aligned. Okay, so that's number one. And now let me also make sure to set the adapter of the recycler view. So dot adapter will be the adapter that we prepared. Okay, so that should be it. Let's see if this is going to work out and if the data is going to be loaded properly. So there we are. We have Rick, we have Morty, Summer, Beth, and so forth. So we have this list, and you also see that it's a lazy load. So it loads them lazily only once it will be relevant. Okay. All right. So this is pretty much it. Now you've seen how to use Retrofit in order to load data. And the cool thing is we got this super complex data, if you recall, here with all of these details. So we got the results, which is an array of, or a list of the different characters, right? And there is so much extra information, but we don't care. We only take the name and we only take the image. So now if you want to get better at this, I would recommend that you also adjust the recycler view item so that it displays the species, the gender, potentially, maybe even the origin. And then you make sure to also add that in here and then adjust your here the character details. Where was it? Further up here, this character. Adjust the data class so that you get this extra information and use this extra information and then display it accordingly. And that's a cool thing really with Retrofit and Moshi, that it can be done rather quickly and easily. Congratulations, you made it all the way to the end. It was a rather long video, but now you know how to use Retrofit in order to use an API and load data from it in order to then display it in your application. In our case, we're using an recycler view here to display the data. So this was just part one of this three-parter, and the second part will be MVVM, as I stated at the very beginning of the video. So definitely don't miss it out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time, and also hit that notification bell, because well, then you will be notified once this video comes out and you can learn how to use MVVM, so model view model, which is a very important architecture that every advanced Android developer should know. All right, so thanks a lot again for watching this video, and see you in the next one.